Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm Adjoa, this is Zoe. What we want to do this evening is to kind of break down a little bit the hierarchy of kind of you go to a talk, you have the people on stage and the people in the audience. So we want this to be as convivial and open and conversational as possible. A little bit of context for Zoe's work at MIMA, and what they produced were 3 vessels called Trickster, Friend, Protector. Kind of 3 vessels embodying the archetype of trickster, friend, protector. These vessels that they thought of as kind of containers that could be smuggled into the museum collections and populated with various ideas, or kind of go into the museum with various ideas that could offer what was needed within the museum space to the other objects that they would be encountering in that space, as a kind of like conceptual or spiritual gesture. So what we want to do with today is like to think about the container again. So like the context of this conversation as a container that can be created, that everyone in the room can populate. Given that we all find ourselves here today, there's some kind of baseline of a shared interest. And based on that baseline of a shared interest, there should be enough there for a conversation. What you have up on the screen is a selection of slides that are going to repeat about 4 times during the course of this conversation that Zoe's put together. And it's things, photos that they've taken, things that inspire them, other artist work that have been particularly important in their practice, and particular sites that are important in their practice. So we can kind of shift backwards and forwards from what's on screen, anything that catches your attention, anything that's being said, and keep this as open as possible. I mean, we really want this conversation to be the sum of everyone in the room. So we really want everyone to feel as comfortable as possible, interrupting and contributing and participating. What I'll do is I wrote about Zoe's work for MIMA. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes reading the end of that text just to give a bit of context for the work itself. We won't show you an image of the work until the end, so we can have a conversation and then you can see the work at the end. After I give this kind of short reading, I'll pass on to Zoe to speak a little bit more about where their practice is now, or how their practice has developed over the course of producing this work and in the aftermath of having the work installed. And then I'm not going to like call on anyone to speak, but then the floor is open. So we're just in conversation. So of course, Zoe can speak as much as you need them to speak. I can speak as much as you need them to speak. But I think it's more interesting if we are in conversation. So I'll read for a couple of minutes. Trickster, friend, and protector speak to the risky business of both the creative act and of intervention in systems and institutions larger than oneself. These entities are created as much for Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Arts, MIMA, in particular, as they are for the idea of the museum more broadly, acknowledging that MIMA, as a younger institution, has a collection that constitutes fewer, quote, icky, end quote, histories for their entities to contend with. Tumika faces the broad history of museums and their associated histories of containment head-on. Within the museum is the possibility of the containment of objects that may be thought of as kin with Tumika's trickster, friend, and protector. What would those already contained require of these entities entering the infrastructure of the museum? In recognizing the persons and ideas that have served them well in the studio, Tumika provided these as archetypes for the museum. In their formation, imbuing them with the traits their kin already in the museum may need. One may imagine trickster making containment suit them, or perhaps imagining escape. More than imagining, smuggling within their interior the tools of escape, in doing so creating an opening that others may follow. Perhaps friend in their interiority, waiting to welcome one's tears, their ears primed for deep listening, asks, "Tell me what is dear to you, your deepest hurts and grandest ambitions left untold and unrealized by these walls. I will listen as long as you need." And what of Protector? Their weapons smuggled into the museum and offering cover. "As long as I'm here, you will be safe." Beginning by forming friend of the three entities, the relational model closest to their own life, Tumika was able to begin working out the entangled encounter of embodied exchange, fundamental to this relation that was also emerging in the act of making with clay. Friend also opens the door to Tumika's engagement with the intellectual labor of artistic practice. If philosopher, through its etymology, is a friend of wisdom, recognizing this affinity places work of the mind within reach. Friend led Tumika to Trickster, a fundamentally liminal figure, enabling engagement in the movement between the literal, figurative, and intangible, between the here now and elsewhere otherwise. Trickster's multiple faces are indicative of the multiple worlds he can occupy. In his capacity to disobey rules and disrupt normal life is the ability to make and remake the world. This capacity to make the world differently, rethink what is just and necessary outside of culturally established norms and mechanisms, are shared between Trickster and Friend. As Tumika, in their studio practice, moves towards what may warrant caution, friendship itself, at its most potent, may be seen as something dangerous, a technique for undoing the processes of subjectification that make us legible to empire, enabling us to begin to understand the tactics that empire uses to keep us powerless. Considered in this sense, it must be understood that if we do need to be affected, if a world of constantly shifting identities leaves us feeling alone and depressed, then the worst outcome for empire would be for us to find one another in our sadness, to become what we need to each other, and to find power in friendship is to become dangerous. In this risky business of finding one another, of facing danger head on, Protector reassures, "As long as I am here, you will be safe." Their presence supports the grasping towards the as yet unknown, coming together to form an idealized team of creative and thought partners that may offer support both to the artist within the studio setting and other artwork contained within the museum. When the objects themselves are conceived of as agents in this manner, the question then becomes for Tumika, what are these artworks up to when the lights are off and there's nobody about? Okay. So that gives you introduction to some of the thinking behind the work in the museum and some of the conversations that we've been having over the past few months. But I just want to pass to you to just, where are you now?
Yeah. Thanks. Where am I now? Yeah, I guess a lot of, I guess, as Ramatola was saying, we're at the end of this project, but then when people ask me that, I'm like, I don't feel like we're particularly at an end. And even now in kind of like the public presentation of the work for the show at MIMA and through UAL in 2020 as well, it's the clocking that this work that's been made and this body of work that's been made was in response to different work that I was trying to make with MIMA at the beginning of my residency with them there. And that specific work was meant to be a steel work, and I did rebirth as a video work this year, which was cool. But the original work that I was trying to make, it was maybe a little bit more, it kind of prescribed more to the, how would you call that? Like the kind of the outline of what the whole 2020 program is. So kind of the idea as an artist, I go into a host institution and engage with the collection and make something. And I was trying to follow that, but then what kind of happened was exactly kind of what you should expect, is that actually there's this tension that then is happening between myself as a like independent artist and then this whole um, system of an institution. And so they were trying to support me to make the work, but we couldn't get to me making the work because of the conditions that I needed in order to make that work were kind of counterintuitive to the logics that they were functioning with. And so it meant that that work couldn't really happen. And so I started making this work as a response, but it wasn't a response work in terms of, oh, because this has happened, I am now going to do this, but more as in, there was a certain point where I just knew that I'd experienced like institutional stuffs before, and that I had learned from those experiences that I wanted to keep like center what it is that I want to do and what it is that I'm trying to do as an artist, which is make, which is explore these ideas that I have. And the 2020 program specifically was very supportive of that, which was really helpful for navigating that arrangement. And so with this handler, I couldn't make this work. I was like, okay, well, I know that these are the things that I can do in order to continue to make my work. So instead of making the work at the workshops in Middlesbrough, which was originally the plan, I'm making it at my studio in Glasgow. Continuing with the research I've had from making quite a lot of visits to Middlesbrough, and spending quite a lot of time there. And even then, like, I realised that, whilst, yeah, I'm spending time with the collection, spending time with a place is quite important to me. I think especially because I grew up in a place where I grew up in Glasgow, and I grew up in a specific area of Glasgow where at that time, and still kind of now because it carries the idea, but at the time people would say, oh, that's a rough area, da 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 da. And it's like, I don't mind people from my area say that, but then when from people outside start to say that, you're like, there's more to it than just that. Like, it's complex. And so whenever I'm going to other places, I kind of hold that where I'm like, I know that there's only some ways in which I'm going to understand the space. And so whilst, yeah, seeing the collections was cool, I was also interested in the place and the area around MIMA itself, but also understanding contextually, like, more about North Yorkshire, Cleveland, more about the River Tees, which was a good access point to kind of think in that way. And yeah, it led to me end up making these sculptures, which was then moving much more in terms of like, oh, just what is that actually my instincts are saying to me? What's my gut saying to me about how I should continue on with this project? And so then, yeah, I started to think about, okay, rather than doing the kind of like, oh, I've looked at your collections and here's my response. I'm like, okay, no, what's happening here is very much, it can be two things. Like, I can be working uh, against the dominant narratives, but at the same time not, or I can be working against it, but also this wider system is still in play. And just because I'm coming in here and doing this project does not mean that we are transforming the problematics to which, like, the 2020 project is actually, I'm not going to finish that because I actually don't know how to describe that. And yeah, so that, okay, so yeah, then I made those work. So in terms of where I'm at now, I think the project and the resourcing of that and the time that I had to do that really reinforced the confidence that that's how I want to work, and that's how I continue to work. So that then affects, like, the decisions that I make around who am I working with, what am I doing when I get, like, some kind of resource. If I'm getting financial resource, like, how do I redistribute that within, like, my community and with people that I would like to work with? Um how am I presenting work? what is the content of the work, what's the process for even doing that. And these are all things that I would think about and engage with before, especially because that's just been part of my practice. But there's a certain confidence of understanding, oh, this is what happens like when you do something like this. And it almost reinforces itself because it's been so rich and following that process. I'm like, oh, that's how I have to continue. Yeah, so that's where I'm at now.
Thank you. Something that I do want to say about resources. I mean, even this conversation, like using the pretext of this conversation to use like the resource of like being paid to have this conversation to spend more time in conversation and like set up kind of experiments in what it is for us to engage in conversation as two practitioners who get something out of speaking to each other, or like there's some guidance I offer to you as someone who's an educator, and there's a lot of insight you offer to me as someone who also has an investment in in the shores of water bodies, and like we have certain shared investments in material. But something that I wanted to bring up about resources is that when we first started these conversations, you made a decision to like set aside extra resources to make these conversations happen, which I would have had conversations with you without those resources being set aside anyway. But I just bring that up to say kind of that gesture and kind of like I'm going to like put my money where my mouth is when it comes to like how this relationship is going to work, and kind of making it clear to you that I value this relationship in this way, and I want to kind of accommodate it and make it as easy as possible for you to be able to support me, if I'm in the position to be able to support you materially in the process of supporting me creatively. So I just wanted to put that on the table. Do you want to say? I hear noises from this side.
Keep listening. We can open up the discussion. Yeah, I've seen the vessels as well, so I feel like I'm holding a little bit of a secret. Yeah. I think Carol also wants to see the vessel. Do we?
Yeah.
By the end, it was the end of your introduction, so the end of the evening.
I mean, if the room would like to see the vessels,
they
can see the vessels.
It's actually not meant to be a secret. I just put together 57 slides and managed to not include any images of the actual vessels. Yeah, there's a huh? Yeah, we're gonna have to make the trip. That's something I'd be interested to hear. This is just something that's been coming up for me kind of generally, and I'd be interested to hear like people's thoughts around I guess in speaking to resource, and actually starting to maybe think about what that is when we're using that word. Because in terms of like say from like institutions, or say for the 2020 project, what was really beneficial to me was this financial resource, like a monetary resource. Also that access to the space, so that access to be able to work with in a museum or a gallery context. Not because that's better, but just for me, I'm curious, so I want to know like what things are out there. But then also what became extremely apparent to me is and through this project, but just in general, I think, especially because I'm based in Glasgow, like there's a lot of resource that the different communities that I'm in have that looks a different way. So like in terms of like knowledge about particular things, like aesthetic resource, and what even that does in like seeing people make or present beautiful things. And I'm trying to think about other things where I'm like, when I'm using that word resources, a lot of time it's this positionality of like, oh, like I am not resource poor and the institution is resource rich.
Mm-hmm.
It's only that if you're thinking about a very specific, like linear idea of what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like really valuing what other people are able to contribute and trying to like make it easy for people to contribute with the resources they have, with the resources you have, or are able to kind of tap into through whatever proximities you're in the moment.
Yeah. And I think also that like, because for instance, in Glasgow, like most people that I work with and spend time with in Glasgow are other Black people, but it's people from all different parts of diaspora. And so, even that, like, there's a cultural richness of people, like learning about completely different cultures from your like particular ancestral like lineages, and then those lineages that you share, even not necessarily. It's like for instance, Maud Salter. A lot of us are descendants in Glasgow, are descendants of Maud Salter. Like thinking about these types of resource, and then there's particular individuals that hold lots of knowledge about particular people that have come before us, and that's like another resource that's like invaluable. So it's a lot of thinking about how to interact with those, and like what are the ethics around it as well, because whilst there's a otherwise and elsewhere happening, we're also dealing with the day-to-day realities of this particular realm where like racialized capitalism is a whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you if there's any, like, beyond the kind of monetary material, but like anything you've been able to tap in, maybe in Middlesbrough, or as through the process of making these works, that has been particularly significant in the trajectory you've been on post 2020?
There's definitely something around, like, kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is the specifics of a place is I think it's important to honor that, but then also I draw from like Black geographies where the non-locality is a whole thing. And so because before this work at MIMA in Glasgow, I was and is kind of continue to be working under this like umbrella project called Black Clyde. And that was departing specifically from the River Clyde at Glasgow, at Govan, and then thinking about different parts of the River Clyde and Firth of Clyde, and then through that being able to engage in like wider study of waters like across the place. And so through doing this project, it was having, then when I went to Middlesbrough, to be able to come in at the River Tees, mostly at South Gare, but because I've spent like extended time over the last like 10 years really in North Yorkshire Moors, most specifically, there is other parts of then that coastline in the North Sea which I've engaged with. But being able to, in an artist capacity, really creatively lean into, okay, what happens when you follow this process of engaging with these waters and having them lead and guide you? What happens from that, or that things can happen from that, or that actually I don't need to. It's not really so much about the end point now. It's what happens on the way takes you to an end point, which is never an end point. But I think being able to go through that whole process, and I'm now like, oh, Black Clyde, it's a framework for me, but I can move to other places I can engage with other places through that framework, and I have the confidence or trust. It's not even a trust in myself anymore, it's like a trust in the things And yeah, that I will keep learning.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask if you could elaborate a little bit on what you mean by Black Clyde and like what that specific relationship is.
Yeah, so the so the area that I grew up in, Govan, specifically at Wenthouse, we are directly on the south side of the River Clyde. However, from our area, you cannot see the River Clyde because there's shipbuilding infrastructure, the Fairfield shipyards, BAE's there, and it means that, like, as in you cannot see they cannot see the Clyde from the area, even though you're right there. So you grow up, or anyone who grows up in that area, you grow up there. Essentially, you grow up next to water that you cannot see. You need to go to a different part of. I think if you go further up towards Govan Cross, you can see, but it also means like that the shipbuilding, the shipyards, and the infrastructure of all that are just like they're continuously there, but also almost because you grew up with that, it's almost like an invisibleness. But there's particular elements such as there's like a bell or a tannoy that goes off to tell the workers that it's their lunch break or something like that. And so you'll hear that at school. And it's not, people in the area don't work on the shipyards, and actually there's other types of military organizations which are in that area, like I think, is it Elbit? Something like that. Okay. And how just that kind of anonymity that they have to be there, and then also they can like, for instance, recently that the cityscape, the skyline there has changed because they've just put up a massive temporary structure, and just that they can do that, they can kind of just do what they want. So there was something like that. There's always been like a tension, and then for me specifically, it was like, oh, what does that what is that as a Black child growing up so close to an inlet to the Atlantic Ocean that also basically we're not talking about. And at that particular time in Glasgow, because this is like the mid to late 90s, it was very, like, still very light, but it was like very light. So that was like that's something that's just existed, and at a certain point I was like, there's stuff here that I feel a way about things, but I don't know what it is that I'm feeling. And so I had a residency at David Dale Gallery, and this is also what you interact with in Glasgow, that because it was such a merchant city, that everything is linked. So even David Dale Gallery, David Dale was I can't remember specifically what his role was, but he had some kind of role. And so yeah, I had a residency there, and I started to like work with two other artists specifically, kind of during my residency there, and then we had an extended like gathering, which then had like 9 other people join us to do that, and I was able to commission some like, it's not small artworks, but small commission for some artworks. And there, that's when kind of like I started to understand about, I'm like, what sort of like proclamations do I want to make about this space? And I was like, the Clyde is Black, and thinking a lot also about this Black as a suffix prefix and what that does to words, which is like very much in the tradition of like so many peers and people that have come before. So there was something about like the specific of the place, but then also it's about, okay, what is then how that interacts with like the collective experiences, or the containers, I guess. I'm coming to your language, the container. But yeah, I'm interested in, and I think that's like with a lot of my work, there's a lot of the practice is about the collective experience of like Blackness, but also speaking to the like heterogeneity. See, when I start using words, where I'm like, where have I got that from? like just like the range of what that is within that. I'm not really interested in trying to make it like, oh yeah, it's a simple monolithic experience. It's just not.
So can I just get in there? I really enjoys you the situating the work in a very physical way, sometimes with the material of the locality, and having that view of geography and letting it water lead you to a project, to an understanding, to an experience. When I first met you, you absolutely exploded my mind with a discussion of deep time and sediment. And I want to circle back to the introduction of resources. So yes, money is important, funds are important to support practice and to have that space, but to also have that time. And that initial project that you suggested, it has come full circle, and you have sort of integrated it, brought it back as a little bit of a support for your friend, your trickster and your protector. So there is something in your practice that brings just time to me, and that it will take the time it will take, but you will get there, is how I understand a sort of particular resource that I grapple with quite a bit. So what is the right time? What is enough time? Does enough time, say for a residency, work for everybody, or should time be expanded or personalized or reviewed or flexed? And I wonder if you see that time element as a resource that's part of your practice and your experience of the practice.
Yeah. In that, because there's something around like, yeah, let's go with, for now, let's go with that that's a resource, because I'm thinking about, because if I speak first to like how this actually plays out, is it's just I know from past experience, like I can't push a thing. It's like you can push a thing to get it quote unquote done, but then what? Like usually it means there's things that have had to happen that I don't like, I'm not cool with. So a lot of it is the flexing of being like, okay, well that's not necessarily going to be that, or not even that's not going to be that. More as in like, well, this is the period that I've got. This is the loop that I've got to do a certain thing. What can I do to get to something that looks like a certain thing? And then I think also that because so much of I remember in the text that you wrote, you spoke to commas rather than full stops, and because I feel like a lot of just my practice and work is like that, it just, for me, I'm like, well, something's going to come to something. And that's like muscle memory to me. So I don't consciously be like, oh, well, I'll find another way to do this. It's just not really how I relate to it. But then when I'm thinking about that, I'm also thinking one of the things that's at the forefront, especially right now, but has been since on this project, is how do I sustain my practice? So before coming on the 2020 project, because I wasn't well monetary resourced, there was no idea that, oh yeah, I'll actually get to continue a practice that was given luxury. Whereas now I don't think of it, for me, I don't think of my thing as being a luxury anymore, which means that the cognitive engagement I've had with myself looks different. And so then I do prioritize trying to, like, I'm thinking, what can I do to sustain? There's not a question of, am I going to sustain my practice? And so in that sense, I'm like, yeah, it is a resource that I am prioritizing, I guess, because actually, especially when the monetary aspect is not there, it's like, how can, I guess that's it. What you do just looks different. it might be that the thing that's made is actually just the process of doing something. And I think also in having such like I've just got a lot of sick people around me where it's like it can be a conversation with somebody. Like I'm really fortunate with my best friends I can just talk to we just talk about all the things. So even if I'm not necessarily in the studio doing stuff, there's somebody where it's like we can have these big conversations. And even that just does so much. So I guess since that I'm thinking about these things, I'm like, it does feel like in the description there, I'm like, it does feel like a luxury still, but I don't know how I feel about that.
And when you were, is someone saying something? When you were speaking earlier, I was going to bring up that comment about punctuation, like recognize, like kind of being forced to put a full stop somewhere that is better served by a comma, and also like thinking differently about the finality of objects, right? So it's just like, yes, you can make an object which is a final object that is acquired by an institution, and that object can still be a version of something or a prototype or something. So like even the final object doesn't necessarily have, like, you don't have to add kind of extra stress to yourself imagining like this is like the be all and end all of like this journey or collection of ideas or collection of relations. The kind of quote unquote final object can simply be like a version of these ideas or these relationships that's like a proxy for something for now, and then the project ends and the funding dries up, and kind of what the shape the work take can shrink to fit the resources you have to hand, and then more resources come, and then the shape the work can take kind of can expand to fit that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there was something that you said there that like clicked something. There was something about imagination, but I can't remember what.
I can't remember what I said. Does someone want to?
About this really interesting because so I do about the trip. The trips. How did you think? How did that idea come about? Of kind of having this, because I'm aware of the awkwardness of conversation. It's been within talking about films and the dominant frameworks and how we approach them. How did you arrive at this? Because it feels ingenious to me.
Arriving, I guess, so before participating in this project, a lot of the work I was doing was producer work, working as a producer in an organization, and kind of like developing this organization as well. So there was a lot of strategic work and a lot of meeting partnership organizations. I guess this comes back to resource as well, is that there were certain things that we were resource rich in, but we weren't resource rich in money, and we also didn't have a physical place that was our space. So that meant a lot of working with organizations, and it gave me a familiarity with how, specifically in a Scottish context, like how Creative Scotland regularly funded organisations, kind of how they operate. Obviously, there's like diversity within that, but generally just understanding what seems to be important to people, or what seems to be important to organisations, what they prioritise, what their languages are. That's a big one. And through that, that gave me a lot for then coming into MIMA and coming into this project and understanding actually what it is that I need to navigate that. So for instance, we had a production budget that because we could manage that ourselves. I knew that straight away. I was like, well, I want to have a producer that I am like working with, and when I say I'm working, a producer that I have chosen to support me with this project. This is something this has been recorded. It's thinking about how do you navigate these conversations with institutions? How do you ensure that your interests are being minded for? Because actually, it's only going to be you that can do that self-advocacy. Because of this, the systems in a lot of the institutions, like the culture and the systems, the muscle memory of how they operate often is counterintuitive, or even very much not in your interest as an artist. And so the trickster is thinking about how that how is the trickster activated or embodied when I'm in particular conversations, particular meetings, things like that. So the trickster was very easy to summon because I was like, it just felt like quite easy to do, and especially in relation to the difficulties of trying to arrive at the steel work that I was trying to make, and witnessing just because it was really like the actual working relationship with the people inside the organization. It wasn't even like, oh, nobody's being rude or anything like that, but more as in they're following the logics of their organization, and kind of just seeing how muscle memory that was to them. It's like, okay, actually, how do you, yeah, how do I get what I need from this situation? And understanding that. No, that's all I'm gonna say about it. So,
I mean, I have a couple of things to, I guess, add to your response. First, with the trickster as like an archetype, and thinking about the difference between the real productive function of certain behaviors and how they're read. So I'm thinking about like Ishu, who's like the I think Yoruba trickster figure, and Eshu being translated as a devil or the devil being translated as Eshu, when like Eshu isn't a devil, Eshu is the trickster, because like certain contexts don't have a way of reading this figure that is there to kind of challenge and kind of remold the environment in their image, don't know how to engage with that as anything other than like a negative force, when actually that is a positive force. Like we need that. So like that's something that really appealed to me about the tricks, like thinking about like the anti-Black woman as a trope, right? So like the spaces that aren't able to engage with challenge, which is productive, and like the challenge is there to kind of like we deserve better, like things need to be better than this, but like that can't be, it's difficult in certain circumstances for that to be read as anything other than negative. And so like I found the trickster really compelling as a character for that reason. And then I want to speak more about the original work you wanted to make. You kind of brought it up in passing, but I think it would be useful for everyone to know.
So I was planning to make a steel diptych, which one was there was going to be some sort of graphic element. One is the River Clyde, and then the other one's the River Tees, and then the words never, forever, forget, always. And I hadn't really decided the positioning of these things. And I was going to make them at Teesside Uni, because MIMA is like part of, I think, Teesside University, and they have really fantastic, because it's so the School of Creative Industries, I think it's called. It's like a small art school in Middlesbrough, and it has really great workshop facilities. And so when I was there, I was like, wow, okay, there's all this that I can get stuck into, and the idea was I would be able to make it there, and I'd kind of picked steel because of steelworks being this it's something that in terms of these industries, how that existed in Glasgow, the promise of that in Glasgow, but then also the prominence of that in Middlesbrough as well. And again, thinking about kind of the sites and the infrastructures of these industries. And there was a lot around like extraction that was coming up in my research as well. And so, yeah, that was a plan, but it was actually becoming really impossible for me to go to the workshops and make the things. And so at a certain point that was set aside, and then I'd commissioned. So again, this came to the production budget and just thinking how I was using that. Commissioned an artist and writer, Harvey Dimmond, to kind of make a... Writing's not really my bag. Like, as in I can write, but sometimes it's just there's people that can just flex that. So I've commissioned Harvey to bring this research into almost like a research document for me. So I commissioned that right, and they made that right, and then they named the document that they'd made, and they named it using the never forget, always forever or something, and they'd put it in an order which was different from the one that I had kind of been working with. And I was like, oh, and I was like, we're actually here. This is it. This is the work. I was like, this is actually great. I thought that was done, because at that time I was done with the whole thing, and I was like, I'm doing my ceramics now, so whatever. To have that all like come back to life again was just really exciting. Like a kind of like rebirth had taken place, and a different way for me to engage with something which in this other space was feeling like a drag. But now in this different space, speaking to different people, is really doing something. And that was great. Moved on, or not moved on, but was making the ceramic works, kind of holding this research and holding this document from Harvey. And then once I made the ceramic works, there's just like making them is not actually just making them. It like alchemizes like many things, and so I'm experiencing in life what is happening from the formalizing of these entities, and then when they were like finished, I was just in a different place now. Like they have just they've done so much. They've done so much, and so I then revisited this document from Harvey, and I realized I have all this footage just from like I film things on my phone. I take pictures of things. I just have a bank, and from that I was like, oh, I'd been wanting to make a moving image work, but it just a lot of this research is like also heavy in part. Like it's beautiful, but it's also there's lots of trauma as part of it. But a different spirit was with me, so I could now make this video work. And then I was making the video work, and I realized, oh wait, no, the video work is just like it's this essay that Harvey's written, which is actually this steel diptych, which I was trying to make 2 years ago. And so then I could name the film. It's called Part 2 because I made moving image work in 2018 called Part 1, The Dinner. And so this one's Part 2, Forget Never Forever Always, which is like a different arranging of the words from what Harvey had made. So the original one was cool. I could still make it, but it's a bit. It's a good example of like what would be the point, like in terms of, and then not being able to make it. All these other things have happened. It's almost, if I would make that, hey, maybe I'll be wrong, but it feels like almost I would just be making some objects rather than producing something.
I realised that it's 7:30. So if anyone is hungry and would like to go grab some more food.
Just out the door.
Yeah.
And it's still late.
Yeah.
Everyone like have food, drink, we can carry on chatting.
Yeah.
Conversation. Do you want me to put the energy?
Yeah.
I also wondered if you could sort of maybe talk a little bit about these amazing images, which really feature amazing bodies of water, and you've touched on what water is, but also thinking about those three archetypes. How do those relate to some of these images? I'm sitting there thinking, oh, there's some amazing kind of, I don't know, rhythms going on there, or connections going on in my mind, and I'm curious to know how, one, you picked these amazing images that have been flooding over us.
That preposition is actually so helpful, because I realized when I was putting this is like everything for me. When at first I was with Adjoa, we're putting together some slides, and then I was like, okay, let me find my stuff. And then once I get involved in doing something, it usually becomes a different activity from what it was intended to be. So I was really trying to find like everything, whether I can remember specifically or not what that thing did for me at the time. I was like, but I remember it being relevant, so bring it in. The memories will come back to you. So I was looking back from maybe like 2022 onwards, and it's not everything, but it's like quite a lot of stuff. And cool, this ready for this bit. So I've been thinking about it in reference to like what my studies had been over the past X amount of years, but I hadn't actually thought about the correlation of them specific to each specific work. But in you saying that to me, it's like I see it, like there's certain images that really hold to me in relation to, like I've included things which are definitely in the realm of like thinking about the protector and what protection is, thinking of those where like there's some pictures of friends in this, and then the trickster as well. There's also definitely images in here which hold that spirit for me. Then there's some things which are like a bit more unresolved. Like this is a still from a video that my dad has sent me, which is of a river in Congo, but I don't know which one. But in the video they're mining for gold because they'd found gold in the riverbank. And then things are a little bit more direct. Like this is from the MIMA archive. But I remember when my first trip on the onboarding trip, and I'd already been watching these videos of Takeshi Yasuda of how he makes pots, and so then suddenly it was kind of random. I was really impressed by like the process, and then to actually turn up at the thing and it's just on display. There's some of his work, and then thinking about these are his notations in the back. So a lot of some things it's very like literal for me in terms of, oh yeah, I can remember like that made me think about that. But other things it's more almost coming back to thinking of like time that holds like a feeling of a time for me. Some things especially things like this, things which are in like museums or things which are written texts like white people. The tonality, I always find the tonality of how they speak to things kind of funny, especially when it's things which are being stated as like an objective reality. And I'm just like, oh, straight away, I feel like I exist in a different reality.
I mean, something that I would maybe like us to speak about more is, I'm trying to find the right line because I want to say naivety, but I think that's the wrong word, because I think there is something that what works about our relationship is that we are more than happy to kind of have a view of the world that would be read as very impractical, or like kind of be very firm in political convictions in ways that would be read as completely unfeasible, and just be like, let's just go with that and see where that goes. So it'd be good to spend a little bit of time speaking about like at what do you think there's any point kind of like stopping yourself imagining how things could be and kind of trying to live up to that? Like, kind of, how do you relate to kind of, how do you situate reality in how you realize your ideals in kind of everyday life and in your practice and in how you engage with institutions?
It's kind of funny because I don't want to, because I've liked use of containers thus far, but I think that, like, I do have to stretch my mind a bit to understand that that's what's happening at certain points. In terms of, and I think that's when it's when I feel like of the institution, that's when I'm aware of, like, oh yeah, there's a certain set of logics that are actually being worked with here, and I need to translate that into this. But because it seems, it's a lot of it's very weird to me. Like, it's actually just like, I have to work quite hard to understand what it is that's happening. I'm aware of that. Like, I'm aware of this. So it feels like a stretch. Like, it really does.
Museum processes are weird. They're institutional processes. I jumped into Holly's event last week and completely took it over by having a rant about processes and they need to flex to people. And they're led by people. So I really appreciated the sort of pushback, and I think I can't speak for you, but I can speak for MIMA without putting words in their mouth. That's gorgeous. But by saying they recognize their working patterns are not necessarily better or intuitive or useful. And I think it was quite a helpful but slightly jarring moment of going, well, this doesn't work, so what do we do? But it's always worked. But can people move past that moment of it's always worked, but it's not working now? So what can we do with that and flex and bring those people in the same space? I like your use of muscle memory. We have these knee-jerk reactions, but that's my process. That's the way it's always worked. That's how it should be. But no, why?
I think that's always like so much where it's like, oh, what's the good faith engagement? Because obviously I have that myself where I think, oh yeah, I'm going to do this like this. But that's why I like working with other people. I like working with other practitioners because they'll bring something in that I just from a perspective that I hadn't thought about, or and that excites me. So I do fight it like it's I understand it because it's happened. So I know that it's possible for something to come against you, and your instinct is to then be like, nah, not at all. But I don't know how you can, like, if you need to think about the thing. Like, if you think about what it is that somebody else is proposing to you, how do you feel about your position still in relation to that? Like, I don't think there's anything. I think sometimes maybe from institutions, almost like it's the I didn't have this with MIMA, but with other times, the embarrassment of how they didn't see, even if they don't think your thing is, even if they still think your thing is rubbish, they're embarrassed that they didn't think of your thing and didn't already have a counter to that, and that creates a thing. But with MIMA, it was interesting because I do feel there was a good faith engagement with what that was, despite it not being easy. But these things are not easy. But what it meant was in the moving through that process, that meant now X amount of years later, we're coming to make the show, or we're kind of coming to the end part of the exhibition design. By this point, we're operating quite collaboratively because we've built a very honest working relationship that has particular boundaries to it. We understand why those boundaries are there and how they function to our advantages. And that process of making the show was really sick. I really enjoyed it and now want to make more exhibitions. I wasn't really that interested in exhibiting work before. but understanding like it's almost like, here's all these other ways of being able to express your idea as well, and almost like an exhibitions and artwork as well for me in terms of how I was engaging with that process. That though was possible because I had this long-standing, sincere relationship with who I was working with.
So can I ask a quick question then? About all of that then, because you said at the beginning that it's something about transforming spaces or the work or your intervention or interrupting this sort of conversation between yourself or this project and the institution. I'm curious as to, having heard what you've just said now, to what extent you may be doing that, if you feel comfortable having these kinds of conversations and creating work in that space now. To what extent do you feel that your work has started to transform something?
I think because I'm speaking to me, it feels hard. My instinct is saying I don't think that I have, but that I think because I started to think about the systemic of it all. I'm like, okay, I'm a person.
So have you seen any systemic changes? I'm just curious. Yeah.
It's a big ask, isn't it?
No. I know you said before you weren't really that engaged in transformation, but you've just described a really quite beautiful relationship just now, and I'm just curious to know.
To be fair, I think, how they might work with a next artist might have a certain flex to it, or like openness from the outset, or like an awareness, maybe actually more so than an openness. That might be there. I feel like I would be interested to know from them. And I know on the 2020 exhibition site they had some writing on my page, MIMA's response to, but I think it's response almost to the whole project. It would be quite interesting to understand. And also I remember in some of the visits, say for instance, Eleanor. So Eleanor, for instance, who's involved in the board meetings and things, Eleanor was talking about the impact of this project on what their discussions that they're having, things that they're doing at a board level, which I wouldn't be privy to. So there might be that as well.
Yeah. I think from the inception, Susan's thinking in starting this project was to squarely put responsibility for engaging with decolonial discussions on the collections. And there was this structure of regular meetings to support peer support, pardon for the repetition, in this context. And that network is something that exists now.
So long-term collection, you mean the institution?
The partners, yes. So they're from Northern Ireland to Plymouth, all the collections that hosted an artist in residency. And I would like to think after 3 years, we can identify a list of concrete changes that will be lasting.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have just started to scratch the surface. And I think it's led to some reflection and some discussions that might not have happened otherwise. They maybe have not always happened in the way I wish they had.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wish, I don't know if you want to, but I do wish there were about 100 things we thought of before the project started. And, years more to prepare. But it's always in hindsight, isn't it? So it's hard on the back of 3-4 years to say this change has happened. And I wouldn't confidently say it has. But I do think it has opened up and made space for that discomfort and for tricksters and protectors and friends to come in. Now, I wanted to break them out when I visited. Yes. I want close-ups. I want lots of close-ups, and I do want to touch them, Zoe.
But I think even the conversations that we're having internally too, because I think there's something to be said about a large institution like UAL also having this like responsibility over a project like 2020 and what that means in terms of opening conversations internally within ourselves, where our own structures and our own like institutionalization is so apparent and so complicated and really challenging.
Unnecessarily so.
Exactly. So there's so much nuance between what it means to be an institution programming something.
Yeah, nice.
You know, saying, yeah.